Today on the Unholy Bible Study podcast, we'll be looking at Ephesians chapter 2. Just heads up, I picked it, and I picked it because of my interest in a particular part of it. As we continue this series on violence, and in this case, sacred violence, and how it fits into Christian thinking.
Yeah, this chapter is a big one and an important one, and it's pretty dense. And our conversation with it was, I think it's fair to say, a little bit difficult because this chapter has been so important and so influential, especially in the theology of a lot of evangelical Christians and churches in the evangelical movement. So we spent a lot of time, I think, just trying to wrap our heads around and remember and even explain where this passage fits in the history of that movement and in the history of the larger Christian movement. We talk a lot about what the gospel of Jesus Christ is and what it means for Christians to be saved and what Christians even believe that we're being saved from. We talk about the hostility that exists between different groups of people and whether and how Christian faith can resolve it or address it or make it easier to live in the world. It's a good conversation, a little bit all over the place at times, but I think we both really enjoyed talking about this passage, which remains a really important one for both of us. My name's Evan.
I'm Scott.
We're both Baptist pastors, and this is our podcast about the Bible. But you don't have to worry because we're not trying to save your souls. We won't be telling you what to believe or how to behave, and we promise never to invite you to church. We just like to talk about the Bible, what it actually says, where it probably came from, and how it's been understood or not by different people at different times and places. This is your warning, though, especially if you are or have been a person of faith. For our purposes, the Bible's not a sacred text. During this podcast, we treat the Bible more or less like any other book. While you're here, there's nothing you have to believe. There are no beliefs you can't question, and there are no questions you can't ask. Welcome to the Unholy Bible Study Podcast.
So we're, here at chapter 2 of Ephesians. The reason I picked this chapter and the reason I did was in all of the talk about sacrifice, especially related to the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross.
Yeah.
And, this idea of being saved by his blood. The reason I picked this one is it references his death, it references his blood, but it's solving a completely different problem than I think. It's not solving the problem of my personal salvation. It's solving some transcendent problem, some huge problem that exists in humanity. Does that make sense? And
yeah, I think it does. And I wondered why this was one of the chapters.
Yeah, it's because it's raising this question.
I mean, the blood is there.
It's not. Yeah, and I think to me that's a very curious thought that you would even go there. For these early writers, that's an important thought, that whatever happened on that cross and the death of Christ, the result is way bigger than me and my relationship with God on a personal level. This is fixed, or at least addressed, a fundamental problem of humanity. And what's that fundamental problem? I would just call it tribalism.
Oh, that's interesting. When you say tribalism, you're thinking of like the way people divide themselves into groups and maybe put the need of their group over and against every other group.
And what has been the problem of humanity from the beginning of civilization? It's intergroup violence, right? I mean,
violence maybe more generally, but
warring,
certainly
raping, pillaging, all the.
people.
I mean, that's not uncommon in human history.
Not at all. Yeah.
And the other thing about it is religion is often used to justify this. At least historically, it has been
to justify violence.
I mean, the Crusades,
groups.
right?
Right.
Who were on the pointy end of the Crusades? Who were the swords pointed at? Muslims,
people
right?
of a different faith. Yeah.
And the belief was that difference needs to be erased, but not by some transcendent mystical union, but by forced conversion, forced proselytizing.
Yeah.
And I think this is saying, for me, I think that's what this is getting at, that the solution or what God has done is so fundamental to humanity that it has erased everything that we think is important, that distinguishes us from some other.
Yeah. Well, so this chapter, we're looking at Ephesians chapter 2, like you said. And it has some of the most, it's got some of the most familiar lines in the New Testament. Like these are lines that probably if you've spent much time at a church at all, you've heard before. And then it has some lines that I think are among the most powerful, like kind of the most concise descriptions in the New Testament of what Jesus actually did.
Yeah. So for the way I grew up, probably you, there's a verse in here that was part of the plan of salvation that I was taught.
Say more about that. I think I know what you mean.
It is by grace you are saved.
Right. So one of the lines in this passage is by grace you've been saved through faith, and this is not of your own doing. It is a gift of God, which is probably like a starting point for a lot of evangelical Christians, a lot of evangelical kids. Like it's a summary of a lot of evangelical theology. Let's pause just for a second and say welcome everybody back to the Unholy Bible Study Podcast. We've been away for a couple weeks. Like it's been a couple weeks since we've recorded, just because of life stuff that has you had to rebuild your chimney, and I've been out of the country and getting back to work after a long sabbatical. So this is the first time we've recorded in weeks, and lots been happening. So I know we missed a couple weeks of publishing and hope to get back on track with our typical schedule over the next few these next few weeks. But we're continuing the series that we began several weeks ago now, which is about violence. And especially, I think the question we've been revolving around, the series has kind of evolved as we've gone. I think we started with such a big topic, but which was divine violence, sacred violence. But I think what we've revolved around, or what we've been kind of, what seems to be interesting to us right now, is the idea that violence and bloodshed is the question of whether God needs it, or how God uses it, or what violence means to God.
Is there something about sacred violence that changes God's perspective on us?
Yeah, that works, maybe you'd say. And this is one of those passages that touches pretty directly on the question. There's lots of other, maybe there are other questions kind of circling in this passage, and we might be able to talk about some of those too.
Let me say something just about my own personal journey and this idea that a death is what fixed everything, a violent death, a murder, a execution, right? Or lynching.
Right. So who told you that? Yeah. Let's start with.
So the logic of, at least this is the way I understand the logic of evangelical theology. First of all, I think we can thank Anselm for these categories.
An 11th century?
Mm-hmm.
Is he
he was
10,000?
He was the one that
not
came
10,000,
up with
1,000 years ago, ish.
I think 1100s or so.
That's what I was thinking. He's a theologian who first articulated the idea that that human beings owed God perfect lives. That in order to keep God happy and honor God and be the people God had created us to be, human beings needed to be perfect. And that anytime we sinned or made any mistake, we dishonored God. Some people have talked about it kind of like as a debt we had started accumulating to God.
And a debt we can't repay or fix. It leads, and the implication is we deserve.
Well, God deserves perfect subjects, right?
Right.
And we owed God perfect obedience and to honor God perfectly. So as soon as you've made any mistake, your debt is essentially infinite because you owed God everything anyway. So if you have nothing of your own, it's not like you can dig yourself out of a hole. That's kind of the logic, which again was not a prevalent way of thinking in the earliest church, but about 1,000 years after Jesus, about 1,000 years ago now, this strain of Christian theology became kind of moved toward the center, or became more mainstream.
And a big question is why? Why is that way of thinking attractive, first of all, so attractive that it, like a huge movement or a huge section of the church embraces it? But for me, it just always made God seem like an ogre. What? Like, it just didn't make sense to me that God views me that way, really.
Yeah, so we have offended God infinitely, and God can't. God's perfection is such that God can't just let it go. Like God has to have satisfaction.
Something has to be done.
Yeah, and we can't provide it.
And someone needs to bear the punishment for this bad behavior.
Yeah, somebody has to be punished. And that's where Jesus comes in this kind of scheme, this way of thinking about God and sin and our lives with God. The idea is that somebody needed to be punished. Not somebody needed to be punished. We needed to be punished for sinning, no matter how big or small any given person's sins might be. But we couldn't pay the debt. Only a perfect. None of this totally makes sense. Like, I feel like I'm not explaining it well, because you have to buy into so many of the premises before you can even understand the logic.
The very first premise is that some kind of a blood sacrifice is what solves the problem, period, right?
I think the first premise is that God expected people to be perfect. And when they weren't, we had no way, and God had no way of repairing the damage that imperfection had done. And that in itself is kind of a crazy place to start. So there's this idea, Christian theologians have said that was the logic of sacrifice, of blood sacrifice, of like animals, was that our lives were forfeit because we hadn't been perfect, because we'd done sinful things, and God needed somebody to pay for it. So instead of human beings dying, we killed animals, right?
And that worked for God.
Yeah, at least for a little while.
Yeah, it helped.
Yeah. It was at least somebody
He could tolerate us, maybe.
Yeah. But not forever, not for good. And we probably didn't kill didn't have enough animals to kill for all of the sinful things we've done.
So just stop there, because part of the way I was taught how Christ works is that it's so connected to the temple and the Day of Atonement and the sacrifices that brought us atonement that were insufficient because they didn't last.
Right.
They only fix the problem for temporarily until we blow it again. But so you have to, it's built on this premise that it's that the thing that fixes our imperfection, that fixes our sin, is a sacrifice. So what the problem is, where were we going to find a sacrifice
that was good enough
to fix the problem permanently?
Right.
And so I like, why? 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 I can forgive people without, like, just out of my own heart,
Sometimes.
Because
we've talked about this before.
Right, yeah. But it just is God like subhuman in that God can't just forgive because God is forgiving?
Yeah. I mean, that's the logic, right?
The implication is, no, God can't forgive just because God is forgiving.
I still feel like we're not doing a good job. How do evangelicals do this? Like, how do the missionaries, they could do this in 5 minutes. And I feel like
I learned the 4 spiritual laws.
What are they? Because I didn't.
I
think
I don't recall, but the very
class.
first one is it's sexist language, but man is sinful and separated from God. They're in the, I can't remember if this picture is in the 4 spiritual laws, but there's like this canyon between us and God, and we just can't cross it.
It's all the bad things we did that have separated us from God.
And by implication, I remember thinking, like, whatever was wrong with me as a sinner, if I went into God's presence without my sin being addressed, there's almost like, man, I might spontaneously combust. That it's such a big deal. And then, but the way the plan works is, God knew we couldn't do it, but he still needed to sacrifice. So God offers his son. The way the book works is, then there's a picture on the next page of a cross. That's the bridge.
Are you picturing a literal book like that you had?
There was a little book called the 4 Spiritual Laws.
I don't think I ever had a copy.
Yeah. And,
but I know I heard this. I have seen the picture 1,000 times.
Oh, we were all armed.
God over here.
We were armed with packages of 4 spiritual laws.
Yeah.
You leave them for your waiter. You put them in your Halloween.
What astounds me is the logic makes enough sense that it kind of works. Like, people, it's an intelligible story about human lives in the world, where you can say, like, we all do bad things. Like, everybody knows that. And you can say, like, this has created an unsolvable problem between us and God, and that's why life is hard. And God has solved, like, the logic almost works. So there's this impossible canyon that we could never cross, but God makes a way for us to cross it. And the way God creates is to become a human being, live a perfect life. That's an important piece of this, is the idea that God becomes Jesus, a fully embodied human being, lives a perfectly sinful life so that he can be the perfect sacrifice that would be acceptable to God, and then dies the death that all of us should die.
He is the lamb. He is the animal that works.
Yes.
I mean, to me, it's that.
Because it's a human being, and because it's a perfect human being.
And a divine human being. Yeah. God killing God. There's so many, of course, I think if you kind of person that, like, reflects on these things, I think, it distressed me because it didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, you've got to kind of suspend, like I said, you've got to accept 1,000 unspoken premises or assumptions before any of it makes
There's a
says.
kind of a groupthink, though, I think probably in every church, there's a kind of a groupthink, an unquestioned groupthink.
Right.
This is just the way it is. We don't reflect on it. We don't ask questions.
Well, you're not allowed to say...
It's a formula.
You're not allowed to say, this is stupid. Like, you're not allowed to say, wait, that doesn't make any sense. You're not allowed to say, why would God be like that? Or what makes you think God is like that? What makes us think God is like that is somebody told us. That's
to
what
ask
God is
the
like.
question is anathema, right?
Yeah, you're not allowed to. I do think that kind of brings us to Ephesians, though, because there's this perfect thing has died, a perfect sacrifice has been made. That still shouldn't do any good for us. Like, I don't think anybody ever said from the beginning that only one person needed to die. But the next leap in especially evangelical Christian logic is that God will, if we believe the right thing, maybe, or if God just wants to, or if we pray the right prayer or say the right words, God will apply the sacrifice that Jesus made to everyone else.
Yeah, so the thing that we had to do is pray the prayer of salvation.
Yes. You had to accept this gift, this
Otherwise,
legal
it didn't
fiction
work, right?
that God offered to everyone.
God, I'm a sinner.
You had to acknowledge all this narrative that we've been describing.
And I realize I deserve to go to hell, basically, right?
Well, definitely.
But
that's what I don't even know if we said it. It's so hard to explain to somebody who didn't grow up in this. But the consequence of your sin, no matter how small or big it is that you go to hell to be tortured forever, to live in torment forever. And people have imagined that in 1,000 different ways, because God couldn't possibly welcome you into heaven or let you hang out with God after you die, because God can't abide being around anything sinful. So it's either perfection or torture forever.
And so this chapter 2, was always used to support this way of thinking, this interpretation, this theological construct.
Yeah, so you believe that already, and you come to this chapter.
And it's confirmation.
And it confirms some of the things you already believe. It's hard to get there. It's hard to construct that theology from what Ephesians actually says.
Right.
Or maybe impossible.
Yeah, I think that you have a presupposition that you read into the text that somehow makes you blind to the words that are there.
Right. But once you have that presupposition, this does seem to confirm a lot of it. And especially that line we mentioned before, by grace you have been saved through faith. This is the idea that it's Jesus' sacrifice, specifically like Jesus dying on the cross, and our faith in it that saves us from the way God would have punished us if we hadn't acknowledged Jesus, believed in Jesus, accepted Jesus. I don't know. 1,000 different ways to say this.
I never remember what stories I've told. We've done so many episodes, but there was a point for Megan and me. I was still in seminary. We considered becoming Bible translators.
Yeah.
Because I love languages. So we did
the plan of salvation.
We did this summer-long training thing with Wycliffe Bible translators to see,
calling them out,
to see, and so they do So one of the things you have to do is demonstrate that you understand that your theology is orthodox, basically, and you had to share your plan of salvation. You had to write it out. It was like a test to see if you passed or not.
How much space was there
You just
on the form?
it
Is
was
like
you just wrote
4 line? Oh, you had to bring your own paper?
yeah.
Is it
I
like
mean,
a
it was
blue
like
book?
a book. Yeah, it's that kind of a thing. You had to write it out just to see if you could articulate your faith, right?
Do you think, were they looking for a page? Were they looking for 5 lines?
They were looking for the right answers.
An essay?
There was, it's how good are you? I mean, can you identify enough scripture and to be able to share the plan of salvation?
Lead us through the Romans road?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm a contrarian by nature, I think. I decided I was going to do the whole thing from the Old Testament. I wasn't going to use a single New Testament text. And
do you remember what you said? Like, what were your 4 spiritual laws from the prophets?
Oh, I mean, I don't remember specific. I can imagine using, you've cast our sins away from us as far as the east is from the west, highlighting that God just did that. There wasn't any in that passage. There's no implication that something happened that allowed God to do that, or maybe Hosea, I taught you how to walk. But the more I chase after you, the further you ran. The problem is not God, it's us. Maybe the garden, that's one of my big metaphors, is it wasn't God who created. I mean, God didn't turn away from us because of our sin. We hid. And God, I love that story. God's walking around almost like, hey, where'd you guys go? It's not God's mad at us or God can't look upon us. He can't find us. I mean, those kind of verses, I imagine, just knowing how I think, that would have been what I did. And I probably did do it because I like to just prod and poke.
And you maybe had the sense that was not the job for you already.
Yeah, well, the linguistic part, but then
but the organization itself was,
and so it was clear. But why is it that millions and millions of people find this attractive? Why this has become the way, a way of thinking that only it doesn't go back 2,000 years, it goes back 1,000 at most. But why this way of thinking? I think,
but I don't think it makes less sense than most of our religious ideas.
Okay, but why this one in particular? Why this way of thinking is attractive?
It's a good question. I don't have an answer. Like, I don't think anybody has the answer.
It satisfies something.
I think so. Like, I think the fact that it can be boiled down into 4 spiritual laws, and I do think they resonate with something deep inside of us. Like, I think the pieces are, to my mind, the pieces are out of place, but they might be the right pieces for the puzzle, even more so than some other forms of Christian thinking or some other Christian narratives about salvation. Like, I think there's something compelling about them, about these ideas, about this way of describing what Christian faith is and what Jesus' life and death means. Like, it's easy. It's fairly easy to describe. It gives you a fairly prescribed path forward, like you know exactly what to do. And it doesn't feel, it's clear, but it's not necessarily easy. You don't feel like on the one hand, there's certainty, but on the other hand, there's still enough ambiguity and enough people are telling you, so this is a free gift that you've been given. You're saved, but to be sure that you're saved, you better do all these other things or avoid doing these other things. So there's still, like, I think it's a perfect combination in some ways of, like, it's very clear and easy to follow, except it leaves you, there's plenty of work to do. Did that make any sense?
And it reduces Jesus to just this all Jesus is the thing that fixes it.
Yeah.
And it like discounts.
It doesn't matter how Jesus. It doesn't matter what Jesus said, what Jesus taught, what Jesus believed.
That stuff's like,
he just behaved very well.
Right.
Yeah.
He was perfect, and that's what worked.
He didn't need to be God, except that only God could have been perfect, apparently.
And then you have to ignore the fact that Jesus was just forgiving people willy-nilly, so much so that religious leaders like, who is he?
Yeah.
That he thinks he can forgive sin.
Yeah. Only God can forgive sins.
Mm-hmm.
And only Christians 1,000 years later.
I mean, and then you get the Gospel of John,
happens.
he breathes his spirit, and then what's he say? If you forgive people their sins, they are forgiven, right? It's like, what, you ignoring the Gospels completely
Mostly, yeah. I think that's another nice thing, is that you can pretty much ignore. You don't have to learn anything else. You don't have to, like, you're already across the finish line. And all you needed was 4 spiritual laws. You didn't actually have to
the
live
thing
with or
in the
wrestle
Gospels, though,
with
is for Jesus, I think the gospel is an ethic. I mean, take up your cross and follow me.
Sure.
It's a way of life. It's not about fixing a spiritual problem that we have. It's to live the life to live the divine life, to live.
Yeah, if the kingdom, I would agree
authentic
with you.
human
if
living.
the kingdom of heaven is here, how should we live within it?
And and it's just ignores so many things. I mean, I think of like so we can go to heaven. That's the ultimate goal, right?
Right.
But then I like to point out, well, wait, we don't go to heaven, at least as far as the Bible goes. Heaven comes here. The holy city descends. God makes this becomes God's abode here with us. It's not we go there. God comes here to do what? To make a new heaven and a new earth. There's something about this that God is invested in.
Which is actually language that's used, or similar to some language that's used in Ephesians. The idea that one of the things, I feel like we are all over the place, but one of the ideas that actually comes from this chapter in Ephesians is that God's goal is a new humanity. Like the problem that's being solved is not our individual sinfulness. The problem that's being solved in Jesus' life and death is the hostility that exists between people.
Which is the real problem that sin causes, right? I mean, that sin creates awful situations, not just for me, isn't it? It just.
Well, what is sin? Like,
it's a systemic
sin
human
doesn't cause
problem.
hostility. Hostility is
true,
sin.
yeah.
Like that's what we mean when we say sin.
And
it's not a list of bad
what's
things.
The problem that this is addressing? Well, whatever the author here means, and for the audience, there's debate about whether the historical Paul wrote this or some later disciples of Paul wrote this, whatever. But still, the problem I think it's addressing is, or it's saying that whatever the cross did, one of the things it did do was it erased all these distinctions, which, if you think about it, is a terribly disconcerting idea, because it's like questioning everything about your identity.
It is. Yeah.
Who am I?
Yeah.
Well, I'm an American. I'm a evangelical Christian. I'm a Baptist. Everything about me that I'm familiar with, that's who I am. But to say that stuff is irrelevant, and not only is it irrelevant, but those others out there that are so different from you, what God has done on the cross is he's stuck us together as one thing. It's the two, it's like the way that it's expressed in Greek is like pieces. Like there's this piece and this piece, and God takes the pieces and builds one thing out of it.
Uh-huh.
He uses the image of the temple to say that one thing that God does is he takes all of us and makes one temple, one, that's what true faith is about, is this recognizing the true universal problem that we have. And all the damage done by sin is damage that we do to each other. But if those distinctions are erased, if our tribalism is exposed as sinful, rooted in false constructs, whatever,
right?
Well, if it's erased, where's your identity?
I think one of the things does
that make sense? Well, before you, am I making sense? My question?
Yeah, I think,
okay.
I think, well, maybe. Does what make sense? The idea that that's what happens,
or that's what God wants to happen.
This writer says that's what has happened. That all those distinctions, the ins and outs, the us or thems, all the distinctions that we approach with hostility or that create hostility between groups of people, they've all been wiped out. They do not matter anymore. We are just one new humanity, and isn't that nice? Like, can't we all just live in peace now? But one thing I don't think maybe one thing that like still leaves me, I think that's a nice story. But I don't think maybe it still leaves me not confused, like, and I feel like I've said something like this before. I think that's a nice idea. I'm not sure it works. Like, those distinctions serve a purpose, right? And the hostility that goes with them and the violence that often accompanies our distinctions is terrible. But I think some theorists would say, and we've talked about René Girard, and I think Girard would say that those distinctions between groups are what keep us from killing our family. Like, our violence and our aggression needs a focus and needs to be directed somewhere. And our tribalism has evolved partly because it's better to be at war with a neighboring country than to be at war with your brother or your sister or your sibling, because that violence spirals out of control. And this other violence, this violence directed out there, can usually be kept in check, even if it's awful.
But sometimes it leaks back in.
It does, yeah. And often it's not good, but is it better than what we would have?
Okay, so
if all those distinctions were erased?
So what I hear you saying is that this sounds idealistic.
Yeah. Yes. It's kind of like, I think I've said this about the Apostle Paul's writing, which is, I think Paul is kind of advocating for faith beyond any religion. But I think he's kind of ignoring why religion works and what's meaningful about about our religious practices. And that if they're just kind of undermining themselves, it stops being compelling. Or obviously people were just going to create a new religion out of these ideas.
So what's popping into my head is these words, I have a dream.
I've heard those before.
Yeah. And for me, it conjures up this image of humanity, not where the distinctions are erased, but that the distinctions are not like, how when magnets, you have the two negatives they're repulsed by each other. Those distinctions don't cause us to be repulsed. Well, if you say, I have a beautiful dream, or black kids, white kids, rich, poor, all those distinctions, yeah, they're a reality. There are distinctions, there are differences, sometimes huge differences, but the vision is not to erase them, but for us to value them with each other, to embrace.
Yeah. Maybe all I'm saying is that whoever wrote these words should have known, should have seen that as soon as you say, you were dead in your sins, but now God has made us alive in Christ, and all the walls of hostility have been broken down, and we're a new humanity and a new community, and we're Christians, and this is what we believe, and it's going to solve all these problems of hostility between groups of people. It is not surprising to me at all that the end result of talking like that was to create a new tribe. Okay, now we're Christians,
right?
And we assume everybody else is still dead.
And I think that's where Paul has been misunderstood, because I think he was way more radical in his understanding of what God had done. That I think Paul was passionately committed to this kind of transcendent vision of humanity. I think he really believed it.
Yeah.
And
I think probably this writer does too, if this is Paul or someone else.
I think you're right. But they should have anticipated Anselm was coming down the road.
Yeah.
They should have been a little smarter, anti-Anselm, Anselm proof this letter.
I think they underestimate how strong the forces keeping people apart are.
There's illustrations.
This hostility.
Look, it's so powerful that Paul dresses Peter down for caving into that pressure, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Wait, Peter, you have betrayed the gospel. That's what he says. You betrayed whatever it is God has done. You just betrayed it by doing what? By reverting to tribalism. Yeah. By going back and caving into the pressure to practice your Christian faith in this particular way.
Yeah.
But that's not it, Peter.
But and I have no idea,
that same letter where he dresses down Peter is also the same letter where he says, in Christ, there's neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male or female. Not that those things disappear, but those things are irrelevant. Is that they don't matter?
I think that's what Paul meant.
And I feel that it's getting at the similar theme here.
Yeah.
But
I think it's the same. I think it's the same or a very similar idea. But I think even by the time this letter is written, or by shortly after, you have the same dynamic.
It all falls apart, basically, right?
And everyone else.
Yeah. I think Paul would be so sad.
Falls apart so much as draws together, turns inward and becomes, just repeats the same dynamic that most faiths or most communities or most tribes live with already. Is this... what else is there? We're kind of
so the question is, so the author identifies the thing that resolves this grand problem, these divisions, this hostility,
right?
And that's the word used here. It's like there is this intolerance we have with each other in the not individually. These groups are intolerant of each other, and what fixed it? The blood of Christ. That's where I what? How does a sacrifice or the blood of Jesus, why is that the thing identified as the solution? Why is that the thing that fixes it for this author? That's where because they're leaning on this act of violence as the solution. And that's where it has to mean something that I don't get.
I don't struggle as much with that in the context of this chapter, because I think there's something. That's where I think this chapter is maybe most helpful. If you think about, so he says, what does he says? Now in Christ Jesus, you who once were far off have been brought near by the blood of Christ, for he's our peace. In his flesh he's made one. He's made both into one and broken down the dividing wall. He might create in himself one new humanity in place of two. If you think about that, not as the like cosmic significance of Jesus' death or like some like ontological metaphysical thing that happens in heaven or in the realm of souls, whatever it is. Like, if you think about that as Jesus, the person who was wrongly convicted by the forces of convicted by religious manipulation and a government that is just kind of prioritizing public order and peace at all costs. If you think of somebody who's lynched, murdered in public by the state as the act that draws people together, I like that idea that people were far off, but now they've been drawn together by this act of horrific violence. They have seen how ugly it is, and how useless it was, and how unnecessary. I think there's some sense in which, like, I think what this author might be saying is the sight of this person who didn't deserve it suffering in these ways because of the hostility that simmers between us. You can't look at this and go on thinking that this is a good way to live.
Right. And I embrace that way of thinking.
So it's nothing special about the blood. It's us seeing the blood and realizing how useless it was.
So it's actually an anti-violence. It's what happens is Jesus exposes his violent death, exposes violence doesn't work.
Yes. Yeah. The uselessness of this hostility.
So it's in spite of
and
the violence.
Way this hostility between us often, like you said, kind of intrudes it. We think we've kept it out there. We think we're that the only people who suffer for our hostility are them out there, but sometimes it erupts in our
thought experiment just popped into my mind. So World War II, what's going on in World War II? Or you maybe even go back further, but you've got all these nations, different ethnic groups, right? And there's so much. I mean, it's not just Germany against the world. You've got the Slavs and the French and the British, and today now we have a European Union, and that at least as far as that reality is, it's not erased the distinctions of the different countries. If you travel in Europe, their cultures are all still different. Greece is different than Germany. It's not that I'm not making a religious point here, but somehow they realized that it's better for us to be a union with our differences, to even share an economy, to share a currency, because what we have in common is our humanity, and that we all live on this continent together. Right. And the way we've done it in the past, we've been murdering each other, war after war after war. To me, that's what I see that the gospel is about. It's fixing humanity in the biggest sense, to create a union. Yeah. Now that might sound new age to some Christians, a new world order, but in my mind, it's that big.
I would I would say bigger. Like
Mm-hmm.
um the problem, the EU is kind of an interesting example because it doesn't work, right? Like
I mean, it has
it's
its
falling
fits and
apart.
starts, right? Right,
And it was
but what?
always a half measure where we thought like, oh well, maybe we can all stay independent countries, like we can in the United States, like we can all stay as autonomous states within this collective, but we'll make it work out of many one. Like our the things that unite us are stronger
But
than the things
then
that
there
divide
comes
us. But are
along
they? Like,
some. Then there comes along some political movement or whatever that actually causes us to turn our heads and focus on what's different, and then we demonize
yeah,
the difference, which leads to the violence, right? I mean, it does. You just can't.
it seems to.
Right. And if not physical violence, just kind of a hatred, right, or a intolerance, whatever. But you look what happens. So the European Union, it's had its good times and its bad times. But what's interesting is what happens during the bad times is these nationalistic movements in each of the different countries arise to say, no, we need to take care of ourselves. We need, it's,
And someone can always exploit those
mm-hmm.
feelings, those divisions,
Mm-hmm.
those what I think this writer would say, those walls of hostility
Mm-hmm.
between people. And it's the
But to be a
what's
follower of
the
Christ requires us to not fall prey to that.
sure. Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
That's
yes.
our job is to be advocates for a new humanity
Right.
that holds sacred differences. That
But is the new so here's and I am I think 100% in agreement with everything you've said. I don't think there's anything more ridiculous than 19th century nation states
mm-hmm.
and the way our world exists. Like I I don't think money makes any sense. I don't think borders make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and part of that is informed by my understanding of Jesus and what
Mm-hmm.
Jesus taught and what Jesus' life and death reveals to us.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think those are religious convictions for me as much as anything else. I also think the New Testament seems to be saying God's done it. God's
Mm-hmm.
accomplished it. God has put us on this path to a new humanity, and all these old divisions are about to collapse or dissolve. And that doesn't seem to be the case
What
yet.
about this? What if it's more that God has revealed a different way that we have to we are the parts of this. We have to make this a reality. If this is God's vision for humanity, we have to make it a reality. We have to embody it in our lives, embody it as cultures.
I think that's a good lesson. I don't think that's the story that historic Christianity has told. For the most part. I mean, some people have said that some people have taken this question, what does Jesus save us from? How does Jesus save us? They'll say Jesus saves us just by showing us a better way to live. And if we would just live the way Jesus said, then we would all be saved from whatever the problem is, hostility, violence.
Here's another problem with the individualistic way of thinking is sin then just becomes a morality thing, right? It's
just like, behaving yourself. Yeah.
And then you ignore like what's awful out there.
Well, as long as I'm behaving myself,
right,
then I don't have to worry about.
It's a narcissistic view of salvation, if you ask me.
Yeah, I'm not responsible for anyone or anything outside of like my very specific sphere of control.
Which brings up a quote of Heschel's. He says, not all are guilty, but all are responsible.
Oh, I like that distinction.
Yeah. And we, regardless of who you are, we are responsible for each other. We are responsible for what our culture is right now. We've created it.
And maintain it.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Let's play, like I said, we're all out of order, and I think that's okay. Let's play Take It or Leave It. This is something, if you've been with us before, you know how this works, but this segment is what it sounds like. Scott or I will either choose to take this passage if it is meaningful to us, if this chapter of the Bible informs our faith and practice, we take it. If it doesn't, if there's nothing here that we want to keep, or if there's something here that's so unhelpful that we have to leave it behind, so we leave it.
I want to keep it, but I don't want to tell anybody.
That's fine. I think of Take It or Leave It just for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like as a pastor, I have to take the whole thing. Like I've got the Bible, I've got. But as a person of faith myself, or just a citizen of the world, I get to decide whether I take it.
Oh, that's what I mean. Yeah.
So you take this.
I take it, but if I told somebody I take it, and our audience is going to hear this, right? I don't want to have to explain why, because I think it's too hard to explain why. Just like we've had the trouble.
I think one of the nice things about the world right now, I actually think some of the dominance of like evangelical theology is fading. I think less people know that narrative that we spent so long trying to describe, the four spiritual laws. I think that's still really prevalent. I think in the wider culture, like there's much less awareness of it.
It's
like
definitely not a growing movement.
No, I think it's all dying and fading. So one of the benefits of that is that we're left with what's actually on the page. And this chapter doesn't say, like, uses some of the same language that gets incorporated into the four spiritual laws, but it doesn't use it the same way. Like, there's no sense in this chapter that God needed violence. Like, we're the ones who are brought near by violence.
Yeah, and the problem that Jesus, his death solved, is this doing away with this hostility we have toward each other. And in this case, it was a religious hostility, right? I mean, a hostility rooted in religious thinking.
One of the things I like about it is it's both.
Well, both, yeah.
Religious, it's
cultural,
ethnic,
yeah.
It's cultural, it's the imperial hostility, like it's the power of an oppressive regime. And all of that is exposed.
Now, there's one thing in here that I think is important, and it's a word that is used here. The word used for uncircumcised. It's actually, I'm pretty confident in saying it's a derogatory term. It's literally the foreskin. And so there was a term used. I don't know how widely it was used, but I'm sure this audience must have heard it. But it was you foreskins. It was a word used.
Yeah, you said there's some evidence that this is a mean name that Jewish Christians, or probably Jewish Christians specifically, would call Gentiles or Gentile Christians.
Right, and you think this obsession with getting these Gentiles circumcised, we need to fix that. You foreskins, you're gross, right?
Right. So one of the points of conflict in the early church was over these markers of tribal identity. Like, can you be a Christian, which is a movement that grows out of Judaism, if you don't look or act or do the things that Jewish people do?
But to bring up that word, it highlights, see, this is the way we think, but you know what? God's going to make the two one, and they're not going to be circumcised. God doesn't make us lose our distinctions. God doesn't force us to change our cultures, our practices. Somehow we can be a part of what God's doing and keep that stuff. Paul didn't want to impose anything really on his various churches.
I'm thinking because I hadn't really thought of it in those terms before. But yeah, I think
we use labels all the time, but we hardly ever use them in ways that are positive. I mean, as a kid,
that's
Catholics weren't Christians because they weren't born again. So the word Catholic is like you Catholic, you. It's almost a derisive thing.
Someone else. Mm-hmm. Like they're outside of the group that I've been told.
And so what's God. Happening here is it is like in your face. Quit that.
So why is that phrase used here? And that's maybe I've been trying to wrap my head around that as well. Like why he brings it up because it's one of the points of conflict or contention between
we don't
Jewish
know,
and Gentile.
Right? But it does point out there is this hostility that's even expressed in our language.
Yeah. That's interesting.
I mean, okay, so the issue with undocumented immigrants is a big thing right now, right?
Uh-huh.
But that word immigrant is a loaded term. And it can mean a lot of bad things. There are some people that have come to believe that immigrants are just all bad, right? Sure. And they're a threat and they're dangerous, and you don't want to go to cities where there's lots of immigrants because it's just awful. So that term divides us.
We feel these are words that mean a lot more than they mean. Like the implications are, or the connotations, like we attach so many meanings to these words, and the meanings different people attach it varies so much from one person.
But one of the things we do tend to do is use those labels in ways that reinforce the wall. And it's like, you've been viewed this way, Gentile Christians. But let me tell you something. What God has done is He stuck us together with mortar, whether we like it or not.
Uh-huh.
And yeah.
Is this passage supposed to be encouraging?
Yeah.
I think it is, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I would try to solve the problem this way, but I think I understand the problem being addressed.
Yeah. There's a phrase I wanted to at least mention, this phrase, children of wrath.
Mm-hmm.
It's early on. I don't have the verses on here, but it says, we were by nature children of wrath, but God, who's rich in mercy, out of great love, made us alive
verse 3
together. That phrase, children of wrath, is that... this is a phrase I was familiar with. I've heard before. Is that one that stuck out to you? Is that one you heard? What would that have meant to you if you'd heard it? Or what would that have meant if you'd heard it in your church growing up?
Oh, those are the ones that deserve hell.
Whose wrath is it? It's God's wrath, right?
Mm-hmm.
But does this say that? Did you happen to look at this in the Greek?
I am looking at it now.
Like one of the things, this is one of those phrases where once you've come to this, once you've tabled your assumptions about what this passage is describing, I think that phrase becomes much more revealing, because I think that's a pretty good way to describe human beings, right? Children of wrath, like we're dominated by, or even like emerge from our anger and our hostility.
The one thing here is he's using we language, and he says we were children of wrath as the rest of humanity. It's like you're we're all children of wrath. It's interesting. I remember in seminary, this is the way my Old Testament professor talked about wrath. He's talked about wrath as going against the grain, like trying to swim upstream. It's not the natural flow of things. It's living against
Wrath is?
It's living against the natural order in a sense, not in a moral sense, but
like it's making life harder than it needs to be.
Yeah. And that when you do that, you suffer.
Sure, that's interesting.
And he said that the way he communicate that would have been the way of ancient Middle Eastern people would have thought of wrath, that it's not an emotional thing. It's the repercussions of living a certain way and what you suffer because of it.
That's interesting.
So if you're an angry, bitter person,
which I am,
the wrath you experience
so are you.
is higher levels of cortisol, right? And it has a negative effect on your body. That there is a price to pay for living against the grain of God's created order, which is we're all human beings created in the image of God. If we lived that way, we wouldn't be experiencing all this wrath, all these negative consequences.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting that hostility, the kind of hostility that kills Jesus or leads to wars between people or murder, or like this violent hostility, seems to be a peculiarly human phenomenon. Like the world, creation all around us is violent, but humans seem to be especially aggressive, hostile. Like our hostility seems to spiral out of control in a way that it doesn't in other parts of creation. So I do think it's interesting
it's
like this is a thing nothing else does. Like no other creatures live this
right way. And what does he say?
Why do we do it?
Yeah, we're somehow being driven by our passions. And the way I've understood that is it's like we're more driven by our animal instincts than by rationality, by some spiritual reality where we're reactive in this world and we're unthinking.
Wait, did you say we're more driven by animal instincts?
If as children of wrath, that to being
but
driven.
Animals don't do this.
Right.
Like I think that's what's interesting to me is like wrath, that kind of wrath seems to be human more than, and maybe spiritual more than.
We're more warped than animals.
Yes. Well, animals are probably fine. Like I don't know that animals ever, like it's a category that only exists for humans and because of humans. And I think that's what drew my attention to this phrase. I think it's really interesting. And there are reasons for this. This isn't the only time the word wrath is used in the New Testament. But usually when Christians talk about wrath, they're talking about God's wrath toward human beings. Like if we are children of wrath, that might mean that we are subject to, like, victims of, or potentially victims of God's anger toward us. And it's God's wrath that needs to be satisfied. God's wrath is the problem to be fixed. Like, I think that phrase actually has roots in Anselm's theology. Anyway, all that to say.
So the illustration I've used to try to express this is, so we have a law of gravity, right? I mean, it's just a law of the physical law of the universe. And if I decide one day I want to challenge the law of gravity and walk off a 10-story building like Wile E. Coyote and see how long I can run my feet, stay up there. No, I'm going to fall, go splat. Now, did God punish me because I disobeyed? And, okay, you deserve death, so I'm going to make you go splat? Or is wrath that you're being so illogical, you're trying to live in a way that's contrary to what gives life.
Yeah, and I think that's what
And
that's what's interesting to me is we are wrathful.
Mhm.
We are children of wrath. And clearly, our hostility toward each other defines much of our lives as human beings. And so we assume that that's how God is, too. Like this, the movement in Christian theology to attribute our hostility to God is interesting. Like,
so, I mean, we did Jonah a while
Bad.
back, but so who got wrathful when Jonah was asked to go to Nineveh? It was Jonah that got wrathful.
Jonah did, but also
And Jonah was like, I'm not going because if I go, I know what you're going to do. I know you're gracious and full of mercy, and you're going to redeem those suckers.
yeah, that's interesting because that
I
book
don't wanna-
begins with God angry.
I don't want to be a part of that. I'm so upset with you. I would rather die than go to Nineveh.
Yeah.
That's
But Jonah wants them to be wiped out. God is just angry like a normal person.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and then I remember one of my professors said, then Jonah preaches the shortest sermon ever given, 40 days and, you're going to be, but yet it led to this incredible revival among the Ninevites. Yeah. The very thing Jonah didn't want, it highlights this hostility we have that's oftentimes rooted in religion.
Yeah.
And it produces wrath. It produces violence. It produces awful things.
And then we attribute it
to God. And we say, yeah, God agrees with us. Those people are awful.
Yeah.
At least Jonah was aware enough to know, I'm the one that doesn't want you to do that, God.
Yeah.
I don't want that wall of hostility destroyed. Just keep them over there.
Right. Anything else we need to say?
No.
We've talked a lot. Yeah, I don't think I have. I think we've covered everything I wanted to mention. Thanks for picking this one. It's been, I was curious to hear your thoughts about it and whether I had no idea with this one, whether you would take it or leave it. And I don't think I ever said I take it.
You do.
Yeah. This one doesn't bother me at all. Like, this all makes sense to me, especially now that I don't live in kind of an evangelical context or a worldview. Like, maybe 15 years ago, this would have been confusing to me. Maybe 25 years ago, this would have been. This would have meant something different to me.
In the beginning, before we started recording, I wouldn't have guessed this is where you would land.
Oh, no, because there is no suggestion in this chapter that God needed violence, or that God's wrath is what started all of this in motion. This seems to be God trying to solve the problem of human hostility and wrath, which I think is the best thing. That's the best project religion can take on. Even though it's obviously it remains
intractable.
Yeah. It remains. Remains relevant.
There have been bright spots in the history of the church, though, moments where
you keep trying to get me to say I like Rauschenbusch.
No, I wasn't going there. I mean, there have been moments of transformation in different societies and cultures.
Yeah, glimmers. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would never deny that.
Mm-hmm. So
thanks.
you've picked the next one.
Yes. So on our next episode, we'll be talking about Genesis chapter 3 and the story of Cain and Abel. It's a familiar story to many people, and certainly relevant to these conversations we've been having.
We get a little blood and guts in this one too, don't we?
Yeah. It should be interesting to talk about, and we're looking forward to it. Thanks, Scott, for picking today's passage. Thank you to all of you for listening. Please don't forget to rate and review and subscribe if you have been watching the show. We are incredibly grateful, and it helps us so much for you to engage, to comment, to leave a review. We'll try to respond as soon as possible to any questions we have received or do receive over this next week. Thank you to Nick Mandog Smith for recording and editing and producing our show. A huge thank you to Jay Kennedy, our executive producer. And now we're probably going to keep talking about this, but you don't have to keep listening.